Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
The kitchen smelled of cardamom and slow-cooked lamb when I arrived at my son Daniel's house that Sunday afternoon. I had driven 2 hours with a casserole dish balanced on the passenger seat, a fresh-baked apple pie in a bag, and a heart full of the kind of hope that only a mother carries, the stubborn, unconditional kind that refuses to die no matter how many times it gets bruised. I should have paid closer attention to the signs. My son Daniel was 34 years old, broad-shouldered, with his father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. He had married Cassandra 3 years ago in a ceremony I helped pay for, stitching together every detail, the floral arrangements, the guest favors, the embroidered napkins that Cassandra had pointed to in a magazine and said, those ones, exactly those. I had smiled and written the check without complaint. That's what mothers do. That's what I had always believed love looked like, quiet, steady, and generous without keeping score. Cassandra was beautiful in the way that sometimes makes people careless. She knew how a room shifted when she walked in. She had grown up with money, the soft kind that never had to announce itself, and she wore that ease like a second skin. I had tried from the very beginning to earn her warmth. I brought gifts. I praised her cooking even when it was underseasoned. I laughed at her jokes and kept my mouth shut when she rearranged my son's life in ways I didn't recognize. But that Sunday would be different. That Sunday, Cassandra finally let the mask slip all the way off. I set the casserole on the counter and was unwrapping the pie when Cassandra walked in with her friend Brianna, a sharp-faced woman who had never once looked at me with anything approaching kindness. They were mid-conversation, wine glasses already in hand though it was barely 2 in the afternoon. "Oh, Alina's here," Cassandra said, not to me but to Brianna, in the tone you use to describe a piece of furniture that's been moved to an inconvenient spot. "She brought food," Brianna observed, peering at the casserole with theatrical suspicion. "She always brings food," Cassandra said. "It's her thing." She did something with her voice on that last word, stretched it, curved it, and Brianna laughed the way mean girls have laughed since the beginning of time, with their whole bodies and no warmth whatsoever. I kept unwrapping the pie. "She thinks if she feeds us enough, we'll keep inviting her back," Cassandra continued, lowering her voice in the way people do when they want you to hear but want deniability that you did. "Daniel calls it the casserole campaign." That last part hit me somewhere behind the sternum. Daniel calls it, my son. My boy who I had nursed through chicken pox and sat beside in hospital waiting rooms and driven to 3 states of baseball tournaments. My son had a nickname for my love, and it was said in the voice of mockery. I turned slowly. "This lamb has been marinating since Friday," I said very quietly. "But please, continue." Cassandra had the grace to look briefly startled. Then Daniel walked in from the living room, and I watched his eyes move from my face to Cassandra's and back again, reading the room the way a man does when he's learned to choose his peace over his principles. He laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Daniel wasn't cruel, not deeply, but the laugh of a man who has been made small in his own home and found that going along was easier than standing up. It was a short, nervous, apologetic laugh that he aimed somewhere between us, hoping it would land as neutral. It landed on me like a stone. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I finished unwrapping the pie, folded the bag neatly, placed it in the recycling bin under the sink the way I always did, and then I picked up my purse and my car keys from the counter. "Not staying?" Daniel asked, his laugh already fading into something uncomfortable. "No," I said. "I don't think I am, Mom. The casserole needs 40 minutes at 350, I told him. "The pie is best at room temperature, so leave it out." I looked at Cassandra, who was studying her wine glass with sudden intense interest. "I hope you enjoy it," and I walked out. On the drive home, I didn't play music. I let the silence sit with me the way you have to sit with a hard truth, not fighting it, not dressing it up, just letting it be exactly as ugly as it is. My son had laughed at me. Not the act alone, but the shape of it, the willingness, the ease, the fact that somewhere along the line he had started seeing me through his wife's eyes rather than his own. I thought about my late husband, Gerald, who had died 6 years ago of a heart that finally wore out from working too hard and loving too much. Gerald would have known what to do. He always said that the most powerful thing a person could do was decide, quietly and without drama, what they would and would not accept. "You don't have to make a speech," he used to tell me. "You just have to mean it." By the time I pulled into my own driveway, I had decided. No one expected what came next because what came next was not anger. It was not confrontation or ultimatum or the kind of explosive family rupture that people write dramatic texts about. What I did was quieter and, I think, more devastating in its way. I stopped. I stopped the casseroles and the pies and the 2-hour drives on Sunday afternoons. I stopped offering to take Cassandra's dry cleaning when I was passing the cleaners anyway. I stopped sending Daniel articles I thought he'd like. Stopped calling just to hear his voice, stopped making myself available at every bend of his life like a safety net that's simply always there, that nobody thanks because nobody imagines it going away. I didn't do this in a punishing way. I want to be very clear about the distinction. Punishment is about inflicting pain. What I was doing was something different. I was redistributing my energy toward people and things that valued it. I signed up for a watercolor class I had been considering for years. I called my college roommate Patricia, who lived in Savannah and had been asking me to visit for a decade. I booked a flight. I went. Savannah was extraordinary. I painted badly and joyfully. I ate shrimp and grits at a table overlooking the river and felt, for the first time in years, like a full person rather than a supporting character in someone else's story. Daniel called about 3 weeks in. Voice had a careful quality, like a man walking on ice and testing each step. "We haven't heard from you," he said. "Been busy," I told him, which was true. A pause. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is wonderful," I said, and meant it. He didn't bring up that Sunday. I didn't bring up that Sunday, but it sat between us on the phone line and we both knew it. Daniel was not a stupid man. He was a man who had made a choice and was beginning slowly to understand the weight of it. Cassandra called 2 weeks after that. This surprised me more than I showed. She asked if I wanted to get lunch, in a voice stripped of its usual performative ease, something smaller and more honest underneath. I said yes, because I am not interested in permanent war. I am interested in truth. We met at a restaurant halfway between our homes, neutral ground, which I thought showed some self-awareness on her part. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. We ordered salads and sat in silence for a moment before she said, "I owe you an apology." "You do," I agreed, without venom. She had the decency not to make excuses, which raised her considerably in my estimation. She talked about her own mother, who was cold and critical and never satisfied, and how she had projected those feelings onto me, seen my warmth as an agenda, my generosity as a trap, because that was all she knew of mothers. She cried a little. I handed her a napkin. I didn't tell her it was fine, because it wasn't entirely fine. I told her I appreciated her honesty, and that I was open to rebuilding something real, but that I wouldn't be rebuilding the old arrangement. The one where I gave endlessly and gratitude was optional. She nodded. I believed she understood. Daniel came to see me the following Saturday alone, without calling first. He stood on my porch holding a grocery bag containing the exact ingredients for the lamb casserole. He had clearly looked up or remembered the components, and his eyes were red in a way that told me he'd been sitting with something heavy. "I laughed," he said. I laughed, Mom, and I've been sick about it." I looked at my son. This man made half of me and half of the man I loved most in the world, and I felt the full complicated weight of it. The hurt and the love so tangled up together they couldn't be separated. "Come inside," I said. We cooked together, the way we used to when he was young, and the kitchen was the place where we talked about everything that mattered. He told me he'd felt caught between two worlds for years, slowly, invisibly choosing the easier direction every time, not noticing what he was eroding. I told him that the erosion was the thing I needed him to understand, not one laugh on one Sunday, but the accumulation of small surrenders that had led him there. He listened. Really listened, the way he used to before he'd learned to manage me instead of hear me. When the casserole was in the oven, he said, "I don't want to lose you." "You haven't lost me," I said, "but you almost lost the version of me that showed up quietly and gave everything and asked nothing. I'm not going back to being that." "What version is this?" he asked. I thought about Savannah, about the watercolors drying on a board in my spare room, about Patricia's laugh over shrimp and grits. About the woman Gerald married who had, somewhere in 30 years of loving other people, become someone who needed to be loved thoughtfully in return. "This version," I said, "knows what she's worth." Timer went off. The kitchen filled with the smell of cardamom and lamb, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, we sat down at my table as equals, a mother and her son, honest with each other at last, starting over from somewhere true. Some people wait their whole lives to be seen clearly by the people they love most. I'm glad I didn't wait any longer.